phone out so I don't run over time here. Well, hello everybody. My name is Mindy Green and I'm a very grateful recovered alcoholic addict. I'll start off by saying I was born 150 years ago in Andrews, Texas, a little bitty tiny town. Born and raised there. I kind of was a little bit of a late bloomer when it came to substances. I didn't really start messing with it till I was about 19 years old, so I'm not one of these ones who was sipping beer at 4, you know. But whenever I did get started with it, boy, I took off like with a vengeance, you know. I had a recipe when I first started out, and it was 2 bottles of Strawberry Hill and a joint. And I could party all night long on that, you know. It was great. And it progressed slowly over the years. I did my fair share of drinking, but I kind of got diverted off with some other substances that make you go really, really fast, and, you know. And some really bad stuff happened to me during my life during that 2 or 3 year period that I was messing with that substance. I was married to a really bad guy there for a while. Not that bad guy, but another bad guy. And he abused one of my children. And that just, you know, it talks about having a sufficient reason to quit something in the big book. And that caused me to quit that particular substance. And I was just pretty much disgusted with it and with all the people that were involved with it. And so I quit. And I got sober there for a little while. And while I was sober, I was expecting my 3rd child. I already had 2 little kids, and I was expecting my 3rd child. And my mother came in one day and brought me a newspaper, the Andrews County News. And Jerry had written a letter to the editor of the paper. He was getting off that same substance. He used to cook that substance. And he was doing a stint in the TDC and on the Cofield unit. And he had written this letter to the editor. And I knew who he was because through a third party, I used to get my substance from him through a third party. And for some reason, I don't even know why, I didn't even really have an ulterior motive or anything like that. But because of the place I was in and because of how his letter was, it was talking about how he'd lost everything due to his addiction. You know, he had lost his job, his wife, his home, his car, his freedom. And for some reason, I wrote him a letter back. It put his address in the paper, too. And I wrote him a letter back, and we proceeded to write through the snail mail for about 7 months. And, of course, everybody was like, what in the hell are you thinking, you know? But I knew over the course of that time that he was paroling to some people that had been really long-term old family friends of ours, and they had children, and I knew them and I trusted their judgment. I knew they wouldn't have him in their home if he was a bad guy, you know. So we wrote for about 7 or 8 months, and when he got out in August of 1987, he moved in with me, and he's been there ever since. So, you know, I'm not one of these ones who judge if you meet online or, you know, you're dating an inmate, because it can work out. You know, we're pushing 36 years now. So, anyway, you know, we went along, we stayed sober for a long time, you know, for years. We went to church, and we had 2 more kids together. My 3rd child that I was carrying, he was 4 months old when Jerry and I got together, and he adopted my 3 children, and then we had 2 more together. And for a number of years, you know, Jerry led the singing at church, and we helped with like the middle school age youth group, and you know, we didn't drink, neither one of us at all. We'd smoke a little every now and then, but we didn't drink, and we had completely quit using the meth and stuff. And things went along there pretty well for a long time. And at a certain point, a doctor gave me a prescription. And I loved that prescription. And you know how your mind will lie to you. My mind told me, oh, well, you quit using the meth. You're okay. You're not an addict or anything, you know. And this is legal. It has your name on it. And the doctor gave it to you, you know. And I had a tendency to run out way before I was supposed to, you know. And then that progressed. Back in the day, they used to hand it out like M&Ms, you know. And, you know, I had all different kinds all the time, all different strengths. And then it got to the point where the doctors were kind of sort of starting to catch on. And so I found me a contact, a little toad of a man. I mean, this guy could have been like a serial killer or something. And I'd meet him in dark alleyways and behind the stripes and stuff. This is how desperate the things will do, right? You know, and I'd meet him. And by this time, Jerry had developed him a pretty good alcohol problem. He was really putting away the vodka, and we enabled each other. Our theme was kind of, you know, if you don't gripe at me about my pill use, I won't gripe at you about your alcoholism, right? And so we went on like that, and Jerry owned his own business, and we were making really, really good money. We had this absolutely beautiful home, you know, 2-story home, 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, you know, on 12 acres. We had horses. The kids had dirt bikes, cars. By this time, they were, you know, teenagers. They had cars, and I had this raging opiate addiction. And the only time I ever drank was whenever I'd run out to kind of, you know, run the gap there until I could get some more. But yeah, we had it all. And we joke now, you know, it looked beautiful on the outside, but it was full of death and decay on the inside. You know, we laugh and say that house, that property was located at the corner of Lortab and Smirnoff. That's where it was. So that's our little joke. It wasn't funny then, but it's kind of funny now. But we went on for a number of years, and it had gotten so bad, our addictions, that Jerry was very, very, very physically ill. And I wasn't too great myself, but he was so ill that it occurred to me one day, you know, one of us has got to get it together or something really, really horrible is going to happen. And so I started doing some research online, and of course everything, you know, either wanted you to go to treatment, which he wasn't fixing to do that, or they were suggesting AA, 12-step program. And Jerry was adamantly opposed against the 12-step program because if any of y'all know about Andrews, it's teeny tiny and everybody knows your business, right? And he did not want me going down there and telling our business. It might affect his business and our sterling reputation that we had. I was a nurse at the time, so yeah, I was the one who was high on opiates, and I was starting your IVs and your catheters and all that good stuff. Again, my brain told me because I don't divert narcotics from my patients, I buy them from the toad behind stripes. I'm okay, you know. Addicts divert narcotics, addict nurses, right? Anyway, we went on for a while, and I kept on researching, and it kept on. Finally, I read this book by Dr. Drew Pinson that was about painkillers when they become dangerous. And, of course, it stressed a 12-step program. And so finally, it was like, okay, God, you know, I'm getting 12-step, 12-step, 12-step. And I was desperate. So I got my friend, who wasn't an addict, because I was scared to death, to go with me to this little tiny shack of a building, you guys. I mean, it had like a propane tank with one of those burner things on it for heat. People were smoking like 3 cigarettes at a time in there, you know. I stole that from Chris Raymer. But yeah, I went in there and there were 3 people there. There was a really elderly man on oxygen. There was a little crazy lady that was bopping around there on every medication MHR will give you. Sweet lady. She sat me down and got me some coffee. And then there was an old man with a trucker cap and flip-flops on. And I'm in there and I'm like, I don't think I belong here. This is Alcoholics Anonymous and I'm not an alcoholic. I'm a pillhead. And I thank God every day that little man did not trip over his singleness of purpose. He sat me down, he put this big book in my hand, and he started going through it. Can you relate to this? Can you relate to this? Can you relate to this? Just substitute the word drugs for alcohol and use for drink. And I did that, and he hooked me up with his wife. I had 2 choices of sponsor, the little crazy lady or his wife, who was a real hard case. She worked for adult probation. She supervised community service. And I was like, oh, crap. I'm not going to be able to get anything past this lady. She's heard it all, seen it all, and she was a recovered addict alcoholic. But I was desperate enough to give it a shot. I had made up my mind that I was going to give this an honest shot and do my best work on it. And she sat down with me, and she worked me through those steps. And I got sober. And, you know, Jerry's theme all along had been, if you'd get off those damn pills, I'd quit drinking. Well, 1.5 years later, he did finally quit drinking. He came and met the little old man in the trucker hat, and he became his sponsor, and his wife was my sponsor, and he got sober too. And that was about 15 years ago almost now, for you? And things were just going along swimmingly. We were going to tons of meetings, listening to speakers, going to different conferences and conventions, and I was sponsoring every woman I could get my hands on, and he was sponsoring every new guy that came through there, and we were just, and things were good. Things were really, really good. We moved to San Angelo in like 2011, and all of our kids followed us here from Andrews. We were trying to escape all of them, but they followed us. And my middle son, Matthew, the one that I was expecting when I got with Jerry, he was living with us. He was unmarried, single, didn't have any kids or anything. And he was living in the house with us. And like I said, we were rock and rolling quite a bit, going quite along. We had helped with some other people that are here in this room get this group started, and everything was just wonderful. And I'll never forget it. Saturday, December the 3rd, 2016, Friday night, he showed up to a meeting, and some of them were here, and he was obviously very impaired. He was nodding out. He was not in his right mind. It was very obvious that he had been using. Saturday morning, we woke up, and Jerry went and checked on him, and he was dead in his bed in our house. And that, pretty much sent me into a tailspin. Jerry had a speaking engagement that day in Midland that evening, and he kept that speaking engagement. How he did that, I will never know. But he did do that. He went and kept that speaking engagement. It's all kind of a blur to me. And I went along, boy, the members of this group just embraced me so fully. They just went above and beyond so many people in this group. And Matt was very well known and very loved in this group, and everybody just really came to our aid and to our comfort and helped us. But the problem is I built up resentment. I was mad at God. How could you let this happen? How could you let this happen? For 9.5 years, I've been working this program. I've been sponsoring these women. I've been doing this deal. And so has Jerry. How could you let this happen to our family? So I was pissed at God. I was mad at Matthew. How dare you? You had every tool in the world at your disposal. You had a ton of good friends who were working the program. You had a group. You had a good sponsor. You had everything you needed to stay clean and sober. And how dare you, And it took a while, The relapse starts up here, right? And that unresolved resentment, my first emotion was fear. I was absolutely terrified whenever I walked in that room, and I'll never forget, he was hard as a rock and cold as marble. And I just felt the absence. He was just gone, and there's no way to reverse that. My first thought was fear. How will I live through this? And what if it happens to somebody else I love? Well, for me, and I don't know what y'all think about it, but for me, fear's a real weak emotion. You're vulnerable and you're afraid. You're scared to death. So for me, fear, it doesn't take long for fear to flip over into resentment, because resentment is powerful, and I can feel justified and self-righteous whenever I'm angry and resentful, right? So I was angry at God. I was angry at Matthew. I was angry at the people I knew had helped get him the drugs that he was taking. I was angry at Jerry because Jerry was able to kind of continue on. I was pretty much angry at life in general. I was angry at AA. I was just angry. But again, that all started up here, and I quit doing my morning prayers. I quit talking to my sponsor that I had at the time. I quit sponsoring people. I went radio silent on all them and dipped out. I'd go to meetings, and people, I put on a fair, I thought I was putting on a good show. There might be people in here that would contradict that. But it was just absolutely ridiculous. I had so many people, reaching out. I was so dishonest. Are you okay? How are you doing? How are things going? I'm fine. I'm okay. I'm as good as can be expected. I absolutely would not, for whatever reason. Part of it was that, there's not many of us women in here, and I had, sponsored a lot of them, and had allowed myself to kind of be put on this pedestal and enjoyed it, I've never relapsed, and I'm sponsoring all these women, but I could not admit that I was struggling and that I needed help, So I lied all the time. I was dishonest as hell, I'd tell them, I think I even picked up like a 30-day chip or something one time during that period of time. Anyway, to make a long story short, I only realized this just a short time ago, what I did was I threw about a 4-year-long pity party for myself. About 7 months into all this resentment and fear and dishonesty, the thought occurred to me, who never really has cared that much about alcohol, right? Well, you could have some wine. You deserve it after all you've been through, you deserve a little wine. So I went and I got me one of those little 4-packs of the little ones. Yeah. And I drank them and it was great. And I got away with it for a couple days, right? Went back a couple days later. And before, I can't even tell you the timeline. I just know that it was like that. Probably within a week. It was 8 little bottles, 12 little bottles, 16 little bottles, and then the hell with the little bottles, let's buy the box. I have never blacked out in my life, and I started blacking out. I remember one night Jerry came home. The next morning he told me, man, that was really good chicken you made last night. And I'm like, I made chicken? I cooked chicken on the gas stove? Oh, shit, I was laying awake. In the mornings, I'd wake up at like 5, and you alcoholics know this, man. I'd wake up at like 4 or 5 in the morning, shaking, just sick as hell, waiting for him to leave so that I could run out and go get me some more wine, or whatever. I even got to where I was drinking the vanilla extract. They don't look at you funny at the neighborhood Walmart if you buy a bottle of vanilla extract at 7 in the morning. They kind of look at you funny if you're buying wine at 7 in the morning. I also, was real good at skipping, snack and tackle here, Walmart here, Stripes over here, whatever, had to go here. And, I'd go certain places with cash because I didn't want him to see, that I was at the store at 6:30 or 7 a.m. buying booze, right? And the only reason, I always had to have cash at Snack and Tackle because there was only one reason I was going to Snack and Tackle, right? So this went on, and like I said, it stretched out over about a 4-year pity party. I basically threw a temper tantrum for about 4 years. I went to treatment. I think at last count, I went to detox like 5 times, and I went to treatment 4 times. And I stayed the first time 30 days, second time 60 days, third time 90 days, fourth time I left after about 5 days. Went to Rivercrest to detox once. That is not fun. You don't want to do that, Anyway, I just could. And finally, in November of 2020, I had been on a several week or months long, I don't even know how long it was, binge, to where I was absolutely drinking around the clock except for the few 2 or 3, 4 hours that I could pass out. And I woke up one morning and I was so absolutely sick that there was no way I could have even went and got any more alcohol. I vaguely remember in the days before that, we had a cabinet that we kept outside of our bathroom door that we had like all the medicines and Band-Aids and stuff like that. And I remember walking past there and taking a drink of the rubbing alcohol. Yeah. And if any of y'all are thinking about drinking the extracts, stay away from the mint one and the citrus ones. Woo! It's terrible. But the depths that I'd gotten to, I have this memory of taking a drink out of that rubbing alcohol and having enough clarity of thought in my head, thinking, what the hell are you doing? People die from drinking this, But I woke up that next morning, a couple of days later, too weak, too sick, too debilitated and beat down to even ask for any more alcohol. By this time, my family was giving me some here and there because they didn't want me driving, and I would have. Anytime if I would have got pulled over, any one of those mornings, I would have blown hot on a breathalyzer had I got pulled over because I was still drunk. I remember I needed counseling, right? Which I'm not knocking it, it's great. But during that period of time, I was sitting outside my counselor's office drinking before I'd go in for my counseling session, That morning I woke up so ill and so sick, and I just knew I was done. And the thought occurred to me, I can go back to another treatment center. I can milk my insurance some more and pay some more out of pocket. And I can go and I'm a great rehab student, by the way. They all loved me. I followed the rules and I was just great. I was good at it. And I knew this book like the back of my hand. I could quote this thing to you chapter and verse. I can't anymore. And that bothered me for a long time, but I think God did it for a reason. I think he let me not, so I'd have to go back and kind of start over. But that's what I thought that morning. What would I tell any one of my sponsees? Well, I'd tell them, start praying, get a sponsor, work the steps, And so what I did was I asked Susan, after I had a couple of days of feeling a little bit, doing detox by myself. I do not recommend that. People can die from alcohol withdrawals. But I did, shake, rattled, and rolled through it for a few days. And I called Susan. And I did not want to ask Susan, not for any personal reason, but because I had sponsored her in the past. But I knew that God wanted me to humble myself and ask her, to help me. And so I did, and she very graciously agreed, and she took me back through the steps again. And that was November the 9th of 2020. And I have not had a drink since. So I've been sober for a little over 3 years now. For the longest time, like I said, I rode that pedestal of being one of the only women that sponsored and having never relapsed for almost 10 years and all of that stuff. And, today I sit across from some of these young women and sponsor them, and I think certain ones, I never could have sponsored them back then, because who wants to get sponsored by a holier-than-thou Sunday school last teacher, I've never relapsed, I really, honest to God, feel like that relapse, that 4-year period made me more relatable, because I can say I understand how you feel. I did that too. And so much I remember arguing with my first sponsor. I'm not an alcoholic. I'm a pillhead. I don't even really care about alcohol. But then looking back, me and my best friend from high school, for crying out loud, when we were like 18, 19 years old, we would drive to the Sonic and get a Route 44 lemonade, pour out a third of the lemonade right there in the driveway at the Sonic, and fill it back up with whiskey and drive around drinking it. But I've never had a problem with alcohol. Anytime I did drink, I usually ended up in a bad situation. We were talking about this the other night at the H&I. I can honestly say, in honest reflection, from the time I was a very, very small child and have a memory, that every single bad thing that has ever happened to me in my life, and to most of the people I know, there's been drugs or alcohol involved, either myself using it or someone else around. Everything. Now there's some things that happen naturally in life, and I'm not counting Matt's overdose in that, but we lose parents, we lose grandparents. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about being molested as a child. I had a big thing about that. Why me? I know today why. It's so I can sit across from that young woman who's torn up about it and said, yes, that happened to me too. And this is how I did it, through the steps, how I got past that, and how it turned into an asset. Something that I can use to help other people, but every tragic, horrible thing that's ever happened in my life, there's been drugs and or alcohol involved. So, today, it sounds ridiculous, and I know a lot of people say it, and I've scoffed at it and thought it sounded like BS, but the truth of the matter is that I am very grateful that I'm an alcoholic and an addict. I consider myself to be smart. I went to nursing school. I was the valedictorian of my class. I graduated magna cum laude and all that good stuff. But I wasn't smart enough to figure this out on my own. I was not smart enough to figure out even the steps, it's old-fashioned language. I'm a reader. I read voraciously, but I needed somebody to sit down with me and simplify it and go A, B, C, D, E, F, G. This is what you do, And today I am so grateful that I am an alcoholic and an addict, although a recovered one, because I know with my superior intellect and my pride and my judgmental character defect, there's no way I ever would have had a relationship with God without this disease and this program. And that's 100% true. I went to church my whole life. I had some issues about that because my mother's best friend was Catholic. My grandmother was Methodist turned Baptist. My most beloved grandfather, his family was all Mormon. My favorite aunt was Church of Christ. And every one of those religions, y'all all think you're the right one, They all think they're right. So to me, it was like if I chose one, somebody I loved was going to hell, right? So what a relief and what a miracle to come in here and realize that I could put aside all of those theologies and different denominations and that God would meet me where I was at. My favorite line in this whole book is on page 46, towards the bottom of it, and it says, and I even have this hanging up on my wall, it says, "We found that God does not make too hard terms with those who seek Him." And I found that to be true. Another one of my favorite lines in here, if you're struggling with this whole, with some of you newcomers, if you're struggling with this whole God, all this God stuff and everything, is, it says in here, we once had certain spiritual beliefs, which I did. I believed in God. It says, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. And that's the difference. I never, ever experienced God's power. I mean, He worked in my life and He did some miraculous things, but my eyes were closed to it. And so what I can say with 100% honesty is, for me, this program, this book has been like Christianity for dummies for me. This book has made me understand the Bible better, church people better. It gave me that freedom and that grace in God to be able to form a relationship with Him and to experience power. And the beauty of it is, it's not just, I've not just been dry and clean. I've been happy about it. I'd like to tell, in that 4-year temper tantrum, I would have told you, my son died. There's not a better excuse in the world. I hear it all the time. My so-and-so died, this happened, and that's why I relapsed. That's why I drank. And I thought that too, but the truth, the hardcore truth is I did not relapse and pick up that drink because my son died. I picked up that drink because I quit praying. I quit meditating. I quit sponsoring. I quit being honest. I quit doing all of these little simple things that I had been doing for 9.5 years that kept me sober and happy and joyous and free. That's why I picked up that drink, is because I quit doing this. I got disconnected from God. I was no longer spiritually fit, and I wasn't doing anything to try to be spiritually fit. And now let me tell you, God offered me so many comforts, and I rejected them. I pushed them away because I wanted one thing. I wanted my child back, and I could not have that. God would give me all kinds of comfort. He surrounded me with loving people. But since I couldn't have what I wanted, I rejected it all. And it led me right back into that bottle, and it took me down harder and farther than methamphetamine or marijuana or pills, opiates ever did. It took me to the absolute bottom of the pit where I wanted to die. I would be disappointed when I woke up in the morning and would have to go through another day of it, So I would strongly urge all of you, if you don't have a sponsor and you haven't worked these steps, please don't let anything, that you think about this program, about how we talk about God and all that, or even if you think it won't work, please don't let that deter you. My first sponsor did it so beautifully. I came in here with all of this stuff about God and everything, and she told me, Mindy, she said, it says, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. And she said, what I'd like for you to do is just set all of those different, all that confusion and all those teachings of childhood about God and religion over on the shelf. I'm not asking you to throw them away, but can you set them aside for just a little bit? And the decision I want you to make is to work the rest of these steps. And I was like, okay. I came in thinking I had to have God and all that stuff all figured out and defined and stuff. And I say it all the time, and I'll say it again. If I had God all figured out and could define him, he wouldn't be much of a God, right? So that's the decision I made on my third step, was I decided that I was going to give the rest of those steps an honest shot. I was going to do the best I could, and I was going to hold him to that line in there, that we found God does not make too hard terms. I was like, okay, show me, God. You said you won't make it too hard. Prove it. And guess what? He didn't. He did not. Even after all that death and destruction and fear and horror of my son dying, all I had to do was hit my knees again and do what I was prompted, call somebody and ask for help, and do what they asked me to do. And I was sober again. And not only was I sober again, but I didn't want it anymore. I wasn't thinking about it anymore. I wasn't angry anymore. I was still, of course, grieving. That's normal. There's a fine line between grief and self-pity. And you can use grief for a big old fat excuse. I did for a really, really long time, and it damn near killed me. So doing the fourth step on Matthew on my resentment, the funny thing now is I found that every single thing I resented him for, I did myself. When I got to the my mistakes part, I'd done it all too. I drank, I lied, I wasn't above copping some money out of Jerry's wallet to go get what I needed, All the things I was angry at him for doing, the only thing I didn't do that he did was I didn't die. That's it. So I would strongly urge you, give this a chance. Just make a decision to work these steps to the best of your ability. God, we talk all the time, that nobody among us can maintain perfect adherence to these principles. But we practice. It's just like practicing the piano. It's just like, it's a discipline like working out or whatever. Some days you don't feel like it and you don't want to do it, but you do it anyway. And on the days whenever you don't do it, you get up the next day and do it again. Start over again. We don't have to do it perfectly. I truly believe with all my heart that the smallest little effort that I make, God honors and magnifies, my results. So I am so blessed and so pleased and so thankful that I got to be here tonight. Another thing that Matthew's death brought me was he brought me some good friends, and it enabled me to be able to sit with some other people in this room who know what that feels like, to be able to share with them. I don't think they know how much they helped me, and I hope I helped them a little bit. People used to tell me all the time, one of these days, this story, this thing, you're going to be able to help people with it. And I thought, I don't want to help people. I want my child back. I don't give a damn. I want my child back. Today, and just the other day, I was able to sit with a young lady who had lost a very close family member to this disease. And I got to share my story with her and be understanding and tell her, I know how you feel. And I know that you don't have to drink and use over it. And I know that God can give you peace again. So it has become a part of my story, and I do believe that it's a helpful part of my story. And anyway, I'm just so grateful to be here, and I love this group. I love y'all. Y'all are my family, and please give this a chance. Give it a shot. That's all I got.